Hey, everybody. Welcome to What Were They Thinking as we talk once again in this episode about sex, secrets, and sainthood. And my very special guest is one of my best friends, Pastor Lee Martin from, yes, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right?
You don't even live in Tulsa, do you? Don't you live in Owasso or
I
something?
live in Owasso, but that's Tulsa.
Yeah, it's a little suburb, but it's
Uh-huh.
actually a growing suburb.
It
It's
is.
quite a great community. I've lived out there. So it's good to have you, Lee. For those who don't know Lee, Pastor Lee is one of the executive pastors and a campus pastor at Church on the Move. Church on the Move, many of you may know, is one of the larger churches in certainly in Oklahoma. And it is well known for all of its efforts over the last 30 plus years. Things like 180, it's known for its kids programming, and they do multiple campuses and wonderful church. It's my home church. So Pastor Lee's been there for many years. He's done all kinds of things at the church, but today he's campus pastor, but he also oversees a couple other ministries. One at Church on the Move called Brotherhood, which is one of the largest monthly men's gatherings that I know of in any church in the nation. About 450 to 500, sometimes more than that, men on a on a Friday morning at 6:30. It's unbelievable.
Hmm.
And I mean, there's nothing really demonstrative, or there's no great concerts or guests. It's just men getting together doing Jesus work in their
Yeah.
lives, and
Yeah.
I love it. And then Lee, you're we'll talk about this at the end, but you're also one of the co-founders of Mountain Men,
Hmm.
taking several hundred men to mountains in Colorado, and it's starting to expand beyond that, but mostly Colorado, and giving them not just on that trip, but as you lead into that those trips, a discipleship experience
Right.
with Jesus and with one another. So we'll talk about that at the end. But Lee, thank you for being with us. I forgot
I
to
love it.
mention that you and I are co-leaders of Catheros, and we do a twice a year we do a Catheros class at Church on the Move. We've got about
Hmm.
35 guys going through our
Right.
spring semester right now. So I love getting to do that with you. Good to have you, bro.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Like I said, before we hit record, anything I get to do with you, Blaine, I really enjoy. And yeah, we've got week 3 of this semester of Catheros coming up tomorrow night. I was just looking at that before we jumped on this call, just going, okay, how do we get ready? I love that we get to do that together, do some live teaching with the 30 to 50 guys that we always have in the spring and in the fall every year coming through that at Church on the Move. It's been a real blessing, not just to those men, but to our church to have a place where we get guys coming from all over the city that come and do that. And so, Blaine, you and I have some similarities in our stories. And so I think that's what gives us at least a little bit of credibility when we're standing before men and saying, God can resurrect your life when you think it's over. And so, yeah, any chance I get to do stuff with you, I enjoy, and I'm honored to be here and speaking to those who are watching this. So, thanks for having me.
Likewise, brother. Yeah, I'm actually out here at House of Resurrection today, just having a day of rest and
Good.
writing and prayer. Set fire to a little bit of trees out there, so it's a
Right
good
on.
day. And so I want to go back. You mentioned both of us have our stories, and
Hmm.
everyone that's a part of this broadcast at least has heard my story, but I'd love to have you share your story, because it certainly is a story of redemption and resurrection. And yet, in the beginning, 15 years ago, it was a story of complete death and destruction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, where would you like to start with that?
Well,
Kind of what, I guess, what led you up to the crisis is,
yeah.
I'm wondering.
Well, you've heard me tell this story many times in Cathero. So if I leave off anything that you think could be helpful for the listeners or the watchers, just interrupt me and have me speak to it. I'll just try and high level it. I was a pastor's kid, had an amazing childhood, just parents that loved me, loved each other, strong Christian people. Like my dad is still to this day an amazing man of God. And so I just kind of grew up, everything was good. But about, I don't know, 12 years old, I got exposed to pornography from a Penthouse magazine, and it was fascinating to me. It was just the most alluring thing I'd ever seen in my life. And that kind of started me on a journey of two areas of sin. And they're really two of the primary areas that men struggle with: pride and lust. Those have always been the two areas where I've struggled. And so ego, selfishness, all those that come on the pride side. And then after that first exposure to pornography, there was just always this allure of what was outside of God's design for sexuality. And, as a pastor's kid, and I had a real relationship with Jesus. So I was always fighting against that. I was always trying to put things in place that would prevent me from shipwrecking my life or being exposed. Some of it was selfish reasons, but I truly did want to walk a life of purity, but I struggled. I had some stuff that was hidden in secret, and that I didn't talk about really to anybody. I had good friends around me, had people I could trust. But there was always just something that I didn't want people to know about me because it brought shame, and it was embarrassing. And so that kind of just lived in the background, never kind of having taken control of my life like an addiction, but just there, just kind of always off in the shadows. Well, I felt the call to go into ministry when I was a teenager, and I went to Bible college. And after Bible college, I got married to Shannon, my wife, who we fell in love at college. And I started working with my dad for a while, and that was great. My dad made room for me. I was preaching all the time and helping build the church, and we built a new building, and I was getting all kinds of experience. We had our first son. And then at 27, I got called to come up to this church in Omaha, Nebraska. And it was a great church. It was like twice the size of my dad's church. And so it felt like a big deal to me. And it was a nice mid-sized church, 500 to 700 people. And I thought, man, I've hit the big time, right? And so I was kind of living out my dreams. I wanted to be this person of impact in the kingdom, and it was kind of happening. It was like we got a good salary, and we moved up there, and the church started to grow, and man, everything around the church, I was just felt like I was knocking it out of the park and getting a lot of attaboys and pats on the back, and there was fruit. There really was fruit that was coming from my efforts in ministry. And honestly, I don't look back on that season and think that I was some kind of a charlatan. I did love Jesus. I love ministry. Like that was genuine. But here's what was happening was we went up there, we didn't know anybody. So the only people we knew were in the church. My wife, when we moved, we had a 1 year old, and within a year we had our second son, Isaac. And so she's at home with a toddler and a newborn, and she doesn't have her mom, my mom, her sister, nobody around. And so she's kind of alone doing the mom thing with two little ones. And during that time, I start spending a lot of time at the church because the church is growing and I'm building something, and my ego is all tied up in this. I wouldn't have known that completely at the time. I was young. I wasn't even 30 yet.
Mm.
And so I'm trying to build this church and seeing success, and Shannon's feeling a little bit neglected at home, and she was. And so what happened was, into that situation, I was feeling like every time I was at the church, it was feeding that thing in me that made me feel important, that made me feel like I was making a difference. And people were really happy with me there. They were really thrilled with me there. And when I would go home, Shannon would be like, "You're late again. I thought you were supposed to be home at 5:30. It's almost 7." And she had every reason to be frustrated. She was kind of single parenting while I was really neglecting my main congregation, which was my wife and my two little boys. And I was just dumb and selfish. And so I began to kind of like to be at church and kind of not look forward to being at home because of that situation. And so, as the enemy always does, when we lower our guard, when we've got things out of order, he seizes on that opportunity. And he did. This young single woman ended up at our church, and I baptized her. And she had a lot of gifts in graphic design. So she started getting real involved with helping as a key volunteer with all of our print media and the stuff that was on our screens. And she was helping a lot. And everybody loved her so much. They're like, let's make her part-time. And so she became part-time. And then before long, she was full-time, and she was like a part of my team. And she and I ended up being in a lot of the same rooms, a lot of the same meetings. And she had had a strained relationship with her dad. I was only about 4 years older than her, but she kind of looked up to me and kind of put me on a pedestal. And then she really cared about all the things that I really cared about at the church. And just one tiny little compromise after another, just stuff so small at the beginning that we could be in a room with other people and they wouldn't even notice. But somehow, kind of, she and I knew this was kind of flirty. This was kind of, there's a chemistry there. And before long, and it took a long time, but each little compromise getting larger and larger and larger, I ended up having a full blown affair with
Mm.
this woman. And Blaine, I'm on Sunday, multiple services, preaching about integrity and honoring God with obedience and all this stuff. And then during the week, got this hidden affair going with this woman, and it lasted for a while. It lasted for the better part of 2 years, kind of from start to finish. And I
Let me
remember.
ask you
Go ahead.
something right there, Lee, because I relate to you. My story is a little bit different, but in terms of the secrecy and the hiding, certainly relate to you. I'm sure there were times in that 2 years that you thought, I got to stop.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I got to end this. And probably there were times you even did cut it off with her and,
Mhm.
hey, we're done. Talk about the power and control of lust and almost an addictive lust that can become a stronghold in our lives. How did that hold on to you for 2 years?
I'm glad you asked that, because let me go back to that original seed of this alluring thing that you keep hidden. I think I had done that for so many years that when this presented itself, there was that lie of the enemy that this is kind of like that. It's like this thing that's really intoxicating and really alluring, but I'll just keep it hidden. Like nobody has to know. And it grew in the dark, as all things do in the dark. They grow, the evil grows there. And so you're right. There were multiple times in the course of that time that like seriously, like we're gonna stop. Like even me talking to her, like this is over, this has got to stop, this is wrong, like even feeling those things. But then the proximity of her still being there, of her kind of, what in my mind I said, she really gets me, it always pulled back. That allure always sucked me back in. And I don't think it was just lust. I think it was pride as well, because it was this bizarre thinking that I had that, like, I can keep this under control. I'll get out of it. Like this arrogance that said, like, I can do this and somehow she's not going to get hurt. My family's not going to get hurt. The church isn't going to get hurt. I'm going to figure this out. I mean, just the arrogance that I had of thinking that I could somehow get out of all this clean. And of course, that's not the way it works. And so,
So suddenly you're on your way to Starbucks and
yeah,
you have
yeah,
no idea this thing's about to be fully exposed and you get a call and
yep.
what your heart had to drop when you got that call.
Oh, okay. So it's two things. It's one, I had gotten really good at covering my tracks, like deleting texts and emails and just being really careful that I didn't get caught. And so it was Labor Day of 2009. It was Monday. I had the day off, and I got up and I headed to Starbucks to get some coffee. And I got a call from Shannon, and I could tell by the sound of her voice, she's like, "You need to turn around and come back here right now." And when you're living in that kind of sin and that kind of secret, you're always waiting for
Right.
that call. It's like, you're just living in fear all the time that I'm I'm gonna be found out. And so I knew, and I remember it wasn't that far. It was maybe a mile and a half back to my house from when I got the call. And I just remember that mile and a half being like, my life is maybe over. And what Shannon had done is she had been suspicious for a long time. I mean, your wife knows. So she knew that something was going on, but I had, lied. I had gotten around it. I had covered my tracks, and I could tell that something had happened. And I think, led by the Holy Spirit, I really do. Shannon opened up my computer that morning after I left for Starbucks, and she found some emails that I hadn't deleted, that I hadn't covered up, and they were damning. They were just like, there was no lying out of this. And I'm so thankful for that morning now. It was one of the worst moments of my life. But if I think back on that and go, if Shannon hadn't done that, I think ultimately she would have left me and it would have come out anyway. And I'm just so thankful that God really, I think God said, this has to stop and I'm going to stop it right here. And so yeah, everything blew up that morning. Shannon left with our boys. She went to one of the leaders in our church, showed them, she had my laptop, she showed him everything. I resigned that week from the church. There was no part of me going, hey, I'm gonna get, I knew I was cooked. Like, and I had at least enough integrity to go, I'm not gonna talk my way out of this, and I don't expect that the church is gonna keep me here. So I resigned. I got up the next weekend and I confessed, at least on a high level, what had happened to all of our services. And within about 3.5 weeks, we had everything we owned in the back of a U-Haul, and we were moving back to Tulsa, not knowing what was going to happen. Shannon was still considering divorce. She was furious, as you could imagine. And I think the only reason she didn't divorce me, she'll say this, is because of our two little boys, because she grew up in a broken home and she knew how painful it was for her when her dad left. And so she's like, I'm not going to immediately make that decision because I know what it did to me. And so we come back about as broken and like humiliated and empty. Like everything we had was in that U-Haul. Like we hadn't been adults long enough to have built up any kind of reserve for financially. And so it was just devastation. Like this life that I had loved. I had loved my life. Said I wouldn't trade places with anybody. Ministry, great family. And now I'm sitting there going, I wish I could be anybody but who I am right
Yeah.
now.
So you guys get back to Tulsa, the Tulsa area, kind of where you grew up, where your dad pastored.
Yep.
And obviously, so hard, you're moving from, being a pastor of a leading church in that area that is growing. And
Yeah.
your credit, that one of the things I love about your story is that, yeah, you didn't fight to keep your job. You didn't, try to manipulate. You surrendered. You said, okay, I'm done. I need to fix my life and fix my marriage. And if it's even
Mhm.
possible. So you
Right.
back in Tulsa, what did the what did the process? Because between you and I, we know you guys are together 15 years later, and it
Right.
worked out. And it's almost hard to believe it worked out, but it
Yeah.
did. And it was the good work that God graced you and Shannon to do together. What did that
Mhm.
look like, Lee?
Yeah. So the first 3.5 years after that were what I call the wilderness. It was brutal. It was so painful. I started working for an event planning company, and I've been living out my purpose for the last almost decade, and then now I find myself like putting trash can liners in trash cans that go in trade show booths at the fairgrounds. I mean, that's where I started with this job, and it was just so humiliating. And I just thought, my life has been completely destroyed, and I'm the reason. It was almost more than I could bear. I wasn't suicidal, but I remember flying back on a Southwest flight from Nashville to Tulsa because we had done an event. And I remember we hit some really bad turbulence. It was like the kind that makes people like scream out. It was like that big. And I remember just being as calm as a cucumber going, hey, if this plane goes down, great. It's just like I
Yeah.
said, I wasn't thinking about killing myself, but that's how bad of a place I was in. I was like, hey, if I die, then I don't have to face everything that's waiting for me back there, which seems impossible. Because Shannon, it felt like we would have a good day and then we would have 3 bad days. You feel like you take a little bit of ground with a ton of effort and then one memory or one thing popping up on TV that has to do with adultery or whatever, and you feel like you're back 3 months. And it was just brutal. But I know the Lord was with me. I didn't feel like it at the time, but we were doing the right things. We had done a little bit of counseling together, but this was just our story. We don't always counsel couples this way. But Shannon said, I want to do some counseling on my own. And so she went to this female counselor, and I wish she was here to tell her part of the story. But this counselor basically said, there is what just happened with your husband, but there's a lot more beyond that that happened with your dad, things that you've been carrying for years. She said, why don't we go all the way back and start figuring out who you are as a daughter of God? And really, her counseling became a lot more just about her than it did about us. And I kind of did the same thing. I was walking with some guys, and yeah, my life, I realized I couldn't even be a good husband for her until I could find out, get right with the Lord, like truly, like fully surrendered. And there's a part of my story that involves me standing on top of a mountain in Colorado. It's the defining moment of my life where this was about 3.5 years into this process, 2012. And I had an encounter with God on this mountain, and it wasn't hokey, like a lightning strike or a dove descended on my shoulder or anything like that. But I had this very significant moment with God where essentially, it's a long story, but essentially he just said, if I don't fix everything in your marriage and in your life, but you can have me, will that ever be enough for you? And it was like, I think my whole eternity was hanging in the balance in that moment. And thankfully, because of the grace of Jesus and my parents and my church growing up, and a lot of people, not just me, I was able to say, I do believe that that's all I really need. And God said, okay, I can work with that. And something shifted in me. And Shannon said, when I got home, she knew that something had shifted spiritually. It was a full surrender on my part. And she had been doing a lot of deep work too with the Lord, and with the help of a counselor and her friends. And it wasn't like we were living in the same house, we were sleeping in the same bed. It was just really, 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 really hard. But something happened then, and it wasn't like overnight things got better, but man, we started climbing out of the wilderness. We started climbing out of the dark pit. And maybe that's not even right. God started to lift us out of that pit. That's really what happened. Of course, we had work that we had to do, but he started lifting us out. And it was amazing how one of the key inflection points for me of a change between me and Shannon was I felt so strongly one night we were sitting up in bed and it was a tough conversation. And I was so frustrated because she's still, I mean, this is years. This is like almost 4 years after everything had blown up. And she's still angry at me for good reason. And she's still questioning whether or not she can trust me. And I was so mad. And I just felt like God said, she is not your enemy. There is an enemy who's trying to destroy you still. And something in my head just flipped. And I went, okay, I'm no longer going to be upset or angry with her because of all this. And I think she did the same thing. She's like, I'm not going to direct my anger and my frustration at him. I'm going to recognize that there is an enemy trying to keep us from being restored. And something about that, just like it allowed us to start giving one another a little bit of grace. And yeah, and it was just like it takes time because it took 3.5 more years. So a 7 year gap in our lives. But the second 3.5 was like restoration, recovery, but ultimately, and you and I talk about this all the time, resurrection. It wasn't like God said, let's take all these broken pieces and like glue them back together. He said, let's wipe that clean and let's build new life. Let's bring new life and new creation in our marriage. And honestly, like Shannon and I are sharing our story this week with with a marriage midsize group, and we were just talking about it a little while ago this morning. And the most powerful thing that Shannon says whenever we share our testimony is she says, "I would go through all of this again if it got us to the place that we are now." Which people just go, are you crazy? Like nobody can hardly believe that she would say that after what she was put through. And she goes, but where God has brought us, both individually with him and as a couple, is the most unbelievable miracle of resurrection that it's worth anything to have that with the Lord. It just, so we can look at couples no matter what they're going through and go, we know for a fact that God can do the impossible in your life and in your marriage. And couples will go, "Oh, you don't know. You don't know what we've been through. You don't know how." And I'm like, "No, we do. We know what it's like to be hopeless. We know what it's like to just go, there's no way of fixing this. It's broken beyond any ability to fix." And God goes, "I I specialize in resurrection." And so yeah, that's kind of the story.
Beautiful, Lee. So good. Yeah, I think if there's one takeaway, and there's so many, but if there's one takeaway with your story, it is just I've heard it so many times, but I think just the humility, the complete surrender that you brought to the Lord, the willingness to not try to save your ego or your pride, or hold on to a position or anything, but just to say, God, yeah, I'll do whatever, even if I change trash bags the rest of my life for this event company.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, like, and I tell people this all the time. I mean, you and I now have been friends for many, many years, and we've climbed mountains together. We've done ministry together. We've had friendship together. But
Yeah.
hearing your story always just kind of sets me back, because you're not that guy. Uh,
Yeah.
you're just not that guy. I can't even imagine you doing any of that, because you are a resurrected man, and because I've seen how you and Shannon connect together. So it truly has been a work of grace. Uh, and I want to thank you guys for being public with your story, giving hope to marriages. To be able to not just do that, but what you're doing with Mountain Men, and reaching a couple hundred guys every summer. And I know that number is just going to keep going up, because it continues to grow and expand. But talking to men about nobility and integrity and their marriages, and talk about how that, as we kind of close out here, how that gives you purpose today. It's
Yeah.
almost like God is, he's taken your pain, molded it into a newfound resurrected purpose, and what you do with that.
100%. Like I truly had given up the notion of ever being in ministry again. I just kind of went, I feel like I've disqualified myself. And so I'm going to seek the Lord in other ways. And so for the second 3.5 years, after the 3.5 of wilderness, the second 3.5, I stayed at that event planning company, and I started to like it. I grew, I kind of got promoted a couple of times. I was making decent money, and then I was just like, okay, this is great. And in that time, Brian, my best friend, and I, who had been best friends since we were kids, we had been backpacking in Colorado most of our lives. And we just started inviting more guys to go with us. And all of a sudden, like, lots of guys were wanting to go. And we were like, took 3, and then we took 7. And then the next summer we took 2 teams. And the next thing we knew, we had like 3 or 4 or 5 teams that we were taking to Colorado in the summer. And guys were having these powerful, life-changing experiences with God. And I remember just going, God, you are so gracious. You are so good. I had given up ministry, and now I'm getting to do ministry. I'm getting to disciple these guys. I'm getting to pour into them. I'm getting to encourage them, tell them my story. And it was from that. And not only that, but I'm doing it with my favorite hobby. It's like what I love to do. And you're using it for ministry. And I just thought, man, if I work at this event planning company and I get to do Mountain Men, I'll be the happiest guy you'll ever meet. I'll be the most grateful guy you ever meet. And out of that, some dudes from Church on the Move that were on staff went on a couple of our trips, because that's where Brian, my best friend, went to church. And a small groups pastor role opened up at Church on the Move. And it was those guys who came and said, hey, we think you're the perfect person for this. We've seen it in Mountain Man. We said, and I was just like, I wasn't even looking at websites or anything to see, do church have openings? I wasn't even thinking about that. And so when I went to Shannon, I said, hey, what do you think of this? Because I thought she'd say, no way, we're not getting back into that mess. I don't want to go. And she was just like, this is what you were made for. Like, of course you need to do this. Of course you do. And I was just blown away. And so then I end up on staff at one of the best churches in America. And I'm getting to do this Mountain Men thing. And I'm just going, God, I must be your favorite son. I don't know why you would be so good to me, because I don't deserve any of it. And I think I know now why. One, he is just good to me. He's just a gracious God who knows how to give good gifts to his kids, even when they don't deserve it. And I'm the chief of that. But he wanted me to learn, or he wanted me to share what I had learned from him through that process with other men. And so now I get this incredible opportunity, and I get to do it with you too. I mean, you're a part of this story too as it unfolds, but we get to pour into men, and we just say it really simply. We say we want to see men become better husbands, better fathers, better followers of Jesus. And for some men, they're doing all 3 of those. Others, maybe they're just young, they're just following Jesus. But we're taking men on adventures to the mountains to meet with God. We've got Brotherhood at Church on the Move, which is just our men's ministry there that is brand, it's got big meetings, it's got small meetings, it's got small group. I mean, Katheros is one of those. And God is just saying, I rescued you when you couldn't save yourself. Would you be a part of reaching men so that they can reach their full potential as followers of Jesus? And I get up every morning going, I can't believe I get to do this. I can't believe God would use me to do this. But you look at scripture and you go, God never used the people that had it all together. He always used the weak to accomplish his purposes. I'm like, okay, I'm that. So
Yeah.
and so now I get to see what he's doing among men and know that I'm the least deserving of getting to do that, but I do have a story of what God can do in a man's life. And so do you. And he loves that. He loves using it. Like I have people all the time tell me after we share a story, man, I just really thank you for the courage to share that story. And I always go, listen, nothing about this story reflects very well on me, but it reflects really well on God. And
Yeah.
so if God will do that for me, he'd do it for you. And that seems to really be an encouragement to people. And I know your book and Katheros and House of Resurrection are doing that same thing too. So we're pretty fortunate that we get to do this.
We are. Yeah. I think we're going to be doing it together forever.
Yeah.
There's so much left to do. Well, if somebody wanted to just check out Mountain Man and kind of what it looks like, is there a
Yeah.
website or something, Lee?
Yeah, you can just go to mountain.men. So it's just mountain.men, like the men is like com on other sites. We
Okay.
were able to secure that domain. And so just mountain.men. We've recently updated our website to kind of be a little better forward facing so people can find out more about what we do. And we're in the process of creating a partnership model for Mountain Men. We used to just kind of run all the trips out of here, but then we started growing into other parts of the country and they started just coming here and going with us to Colorado. And so we're like, this isn't really working. So we're in the process this year of developing a partnership model where churches can become affiliates of Mountain Men and they can plan trips in their area and we'll help them, we'll facilitate, we'll consult, we'll show them our process and hopefully see kind of Mountain Men making a difference in churches all across the country. So
Well, I know that's going to happen. It's not hopefully, it's going to happen. It is such a powerful ministry. As you know, my son and I went on a trip a couple of years ago. It was life-changing for us together, but also in our own lives. So
yeah.
thank you for what you do, man. And I want to thank as we close all of our partners. This is a partners broadcast. We do this for those of you, so many of you that support House of Resurrection and all of the work we do with Katheros and other things. And I'm actually repping one of my partner shirts today, Victory Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who are partners with us. In fact, they helped to provide a brand new couples residence that just showed up at our property last week, and we're getting ready to do all the final work on that. So we do want to thank all of you that support us and are a part of this ministry. It really means a lot to us. Lee, would you mind doing this? We have people from all backgrounds watching and listening right now. Some that
Mhm.
are pastors, some that are individuals, some married, some single, but they may have issues in their own lives that maybe they've never shared, or maybe they know somebody that does. Would you mind praying for those that are listening right now?
I'd be honored to. Yeah, I'd love to. Father, I thank you so much for anybody that's watching or listening to this right now. We are people in need of a savior, and you have provided it. Jesus, you came for us. And so, whatever we're facing, whatever challenge is in front of us, maybe from our own doing, maybe it's from the outside. I don't know, God, but I know that you provide a way. You can be trusted. If we surrender to you, you take care of us. You're a good, good father who gives generously to his sons and his daughters. And I just want to thank you for the people on this call that support ministries like House of Resurrection and Blaine and Katheros and Mountain Men and Brotherhood. And it's because of people in your kingdom like that we're able to make a difference, to share the gospel, to extend light into a dark world. And so I thank you for them. And I just pray your blessing and your guidance over anybody that's hearing this prayer right now. God, you know who they are. You know them by name. You know their situation. You know that today may have been a rough day for them. And I just pray your blessing and guidance and closeness in their life, Father. Thank you that even though I don't know who's watching this or listening, I will know them in eternity as a
Yeah.
brother and a sister in Christ. And I look forward to getting to know them. And we'll have all the time we need to enjoy being in this family together. And I thank you for that. And until then, I pray your blessing upon them. I ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Wonderful, brother. Thank you very much. And I will see you tomorrow night.
Yeah, I can't wait, brother. Looking forward to it.
Peace.
See you guys.